Hello, listener. So, you like scary movies? Well, it is a creepy night, and with all those crazy lunatics out there, well, you really shouldn't be alone. Ooh, you look so freaked out right now. Now I suggest you listen very carefully. Subscribe to Class Horrorcast, or I'll gut you like a fish. Enjoy the show. I'll be watching.
Hey, I'm Aaron, and welcome back to another episode of the Class Horrorcast. On the show, we hear from a creator of some of the monsters and creatures we all know and love. He has worked on Night of the Demons, Part 4 of the Howling and Nightmare on Elm Street to Society and Tremors. He has since decided to not only create the horrifying monsters, but also the worlds they live in and the characters they face. He is currently working with multiple scripts, producing and directing projects, all while running a Las Vegas-based movie prop museum with over 150 pieces for movies such as Silent Hill, Scream, Jason X, Hellfest, The Mummy, and much more. We dive into his words of wisdom for following your dreams, his love and appreciation for the fans, his upcoming projects, and some incredible stories surrounding his work with the biggest names in horror. Dive into the mind of a monster maniac, special effects master, and soon-to-be director-producer, Nick Benson. Can you remember your first horror movie or, I guess, horror-related experience?
As far as my first horror movie I worked on, or first horror movie
No,
period?
like the first time I guess you were exposed, maybe you had seen a horror movie or something like that.
Right. Well, I grew up the son of an executive for Universal Studios.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So I was exposed to the Universal monsters pretty early. And I was a big fan, of course. So that was really my earliest exposure. But then, of course, as I got a little older into the 70s, I started like sneaking watching things like Hammer films and things like that my mom really didn't like me to watch. So, it was kind of, I think one of them was like Legend of Hell House, mm-hmm. and, like the Bride of Dracula, or what, I don't remember Christopher Lee's first Dracula film, but I think that was probably the next one that I was exposed to.
Would you say that you were scared or more intrigued?
Well, the Universal monsters never really scared me per se. I was more intrigued by them and their stories, how they all seemed to be misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get into things like Legend of Hell House and all of this, the supernatural stuff, and like Christopher Lee's version of Dracula, it's a much scarier type of thing. Plus, you had the nudity, and you had a lot more things that were added to that weren't part of Universal's core. They just weren't part of that. That wasn't really the thing then. So for me, it was exposure to something that was almost completely new, versus Universal stuff. I loved Universal stuff. I love the creepy stuff. Always been a monster kid. But my exposure to that really got me kind of interested, and it did scare me at first, but it made me want to watch more. So that's sort of what, piqued my interest at that point, and did everything I could to get a hold of magazines and, stuff like that.
Yeah, that was a question that I was going to follow up with. From that age, did you become a collector of anything?
Not particularly. I just became more obsessed with watching more and more films. For everything from Hitchcock stuff, which I was really fascinated with because he did things in such a way there wasn't so many effects versus the suspense and the way that he wrote it and directed it. I really enjoyed that style because it was really scary in the way that he did his films, but there wasn't ever that shock. The shock element wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to tell a story and freak you out without having to do a lot of that. So I really enjoyed his stuff. The Hammer stuff just continued for me. I loved it. And then I got into, things like, like Halloween and The Thing, and, it just grew. It just grew. My interest just grew more and more. I started getting a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, and and digging through that and looking for new stuff to watch and new things to look for. So I kind of became obsessed with it. I didn't really have a target on making this stuff for a living. Mm-hmm. Music was really my first interest, and I was a musician first and foremost.
And when, I guess then, when did things switch for you? Because I know now, I mean, your name is synonymous with some of the, the best effects, some of the biggest movies in horror history. And when did things switch for you, or when did you start to look at that as something?
I'm honestly, I feel lucky to be associated with them, because really I was taught by them. I was part of their teams. XFX being the first, Steve Johnson in XFX. He was actually a roommate, and he's the one that pulled me into the business, really. I was looking to do some wild theatrical stuff on stage with my band, and he happened to be a roommate. So I, having this guy that worked on Ghostbusters and all these incredible films, Fright Night, all these great films before I even became his roommate. We kind of kicked it around, and I was kicking around ideas with him, and he said, "Hey, why don't you just come make rubber monsters with me?" So, that kind of, I never thought that would happen in my life. And I just kind of went, wow, this is really an opportunity. So I obviously snatched onto it, and it kind of blossomed from there. And I kind of gave up. I didn't really give up music, but I gave up the band I was in and just started working on film.
And was that I guess, a drastic transition for you? Like, did you feel like you were throwing yourself in the deep end by doing that?
Definitely. Definitely. It was like out of the frying pan into the fire kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because the stuff I was doing on stage, of course, you could get away with, a lot of things that really, like, now all of a sudden I'm having to do things that are, count, and they're on film, and they're, they have to work properly. They can't fail. You can't kind of work through it. Although it does kind of work that way in film. You can work through it, and we do. There are a lot more problems in filmmaking effects than ever any of my onstage antics. But so it was a growing experience. But yeah, I was nervous as hell. It made me really nervous, but it was something that I felt compelled to do. And Steve was very supportive.
And so from that point, then, can you remember, like, the first project that you would have worked on?
Yes. He brought me on to Night of the Demons.
Okay, so that was the first.
That was the first film.
Crazy.
And that was that situation. He had a film that he had left Boss Film Studios, and was setting up XFX. And I worked with Steve and Todd Masters on Night of the Demons, and then right after that on into Dead Heat.
How was that, having something like Night of the Demons? Because I'm not, obviously, I know now it has a huge following, and it's such a cult classic. But at the time, was it treated like that? Did it feel like a huge?
Not at all.
Deal? No?
Not at all. That film to me at that time was, even Steve was like, it's relatively low budget, where we don't have a lot to work with, and it was campy, and I don't know. I didn't really take it all that seriously. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. We made some really neat things for it. And I never thought that film would last the test of time. Certainly not this long.
Yeah, and am I right in saying within that year, that first year in 1988, you had done Night of the Demons, Dead Heat, The Blob,
Howling 4.
Yeah, all one after the other. That seems like a crazy. That really is in the deep end in a way.
It really was. It was diving right in and putting myself as hard and fast as I could into it.
Do you think that benefited you?
I hope so. I mean, I I really saw it as the opportunity I was being given. You know, I was taught by some of the best guys in the business. So for me, it was like, how can I turn anything down? Because I'm working with all these phenomenal artists like Steve, Todd, Screaming Mad George, you know, all these brilliant guys, and they're all, you know, teaching me and guiding me how to do things. And I don't think there's any school in the world that could have taught me what those guys taught me. Mm-hmm. Even though, you know, a lot of guys go to makeup school and they're really good, but you know, I got a really lucky break.
That was something that a lot of people had reached out with a question, and they all kind of formed around that same premise, I guess, of, you know, advice for somebody who's looking to do something maybe similar to what you've done, or get into that aspect of the business. Are things like makeup school and these courses, would you say they're a good idea, or is there a circumstance that you should go that way versus?
I think that if you are feeling it as passionately as somebody like me, definitely take advantage. If you have the ability to go to a school, you know, like let's say Savini or even out here, Tom Devlin has a school out here that's not that expensive. Cinema makeup school is another one, but that's really high dollar, high end. But, you know, I would definitely say, you know, get the education in it, because the more you know, the better you can be. And if you can afford to do it, do it. I was just really, like I said, I'm a fluke. I was really lucky. I didn't have any formal training. All my training was basically by those guys. You know, they taught me everything.
And do you think nowadays, for somebody maybe looking to break in, you know, obviously starting at the bottom of the ladder, would you say you need some qualification per se behind you to even get in, or should it be based off of practical, what you can show somebody?
Yeah, I think honestly, it really breaks down to what your talent is. If you're like, there's a couple guys that I've, you know, brought in to work for me that are phenomenal sculptors. They're not formally trained, mm-hmm. but they know the processes and they're really good at it. Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, hiring people, it doesn't make any difference for me because I was given that opportunity. So if I see talent in somebody, then I try to foster that. I try to help with that, because I got that same break. Why wouldn't I pass that on, you know?
Yeah. You've worked on like some crazy movies. The list just seems like it's like, for a lot of people, horror fans, it's like, seems like the upper echelon. Do you have a favorite movie that you've worked on? I know it's like asking somebody to choose.
That's probably one of the most common questions I get. Yeah.
Is there something that sticks out for you, or maybe a favorite effect makeup that you worked on?
Not particularly. I really enjoyed every film I've worked on, because they're all different experiences. And if you look at my films in general, I mean, they're all kind of really different from each other. Yeah. They're not so similar. But I mean, as far as a favorite goes, coming away from it, like Nightmare on Elm Street 4, I'll use that as an example. Like as far as a bond with the cast and crew, I mean, we were in the middle of a writer's strike at that point when we were making that film, and everybody involved, every effects house, because there was a lot of effects people working on that at the same time. So I just worked on 2 sequences. I worked on Freddy's death with Steve, and I worked on the cockroach transformation with Screaming Mad George. So for me, like, I got to, like, because of the writer's strike, there was so much going on, and it was a little bit difficult to overcome a lot of challenges that came along with that. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, a lot of people don't realize that the cast rewrote a lot of their scenes in that film. So the cast were actually responsible for making that script as great as it was. And the crew, just everybody wanted to do their best work. That was the peak of the industry. We were kicking ass. This was Nightmare on Elm Street. We had to make it better than the previous 3 Elm Streets. So everybody was in that same mindset to like up everything, bring it up as good as we can get it. So, I feel like we really achieved that. And like, for me, let's see, we're 35 years or so away from that now. And being 35 years away from that production, I think that situation created a bond with the cast and crew, because those are the people, I still talk to them regularly. I'm still friends with them. I'm still friends with Lisa Wilcox. I'm still friends with Brooke Thies. I'm still very good friends with the production designer, Mick Strawn. We formed alliances, on that film. We formed a lot of alliances and were able to create lifelong friendships. And while that happens on some other films as well, it wasn't as big and broad as the connections with everybody on Elm Street.
And just on the topic of, something like Nightmare on Elm Street, is there a movie, character, or franchise that you would have loved to have done that you haven't so far?
That's a good question. What's interesting to me is it seems like there's so many movies that are reinventions of something else, and stuff gets kind of regurgitated, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's not really a good term, because there are a lot of really good reinventions of a lot of horror scripts, but it's hard to come up with something original. I'm in a lucky position now, like through COVID and everything. I started out just trying to pull more effects things, and I helped out with a recent film called Cyst. I helped out with the designs for that, and I was originally going to do that film, and then just certain circumstances happened where it wasn't going to work, so that got pulled and then given to somebody else. But they did use some of my designs, and they were, they're very, very kind bunch of production people. And then the next thing I know, Steve Johnson called me up after 30 years, and we did a music video for Slipknot together, and then that sort of brought more to the table, brought more podcasts, brought more different things to the table for me to get back out there and get my name back out there. And then the project started to kind of roll in. Then, but COVID hit, so things got shelved, but now things are starting to come back out. During COVID, what I did was I gathered this team of people that I think are phenomenal. I've got 2 writers that I'm working with now. So I'm moving sort of into a more producer director role.
Nice.
But that's also great, but I still have that love for effects. So I'm going to, of course, be designing and still overseeing a lot of the effects stuff. But I feel like I have the greatest, like over this last year, I've pulled together this immense, wonderful team of people that have gravitated to me. And I don't know if it's just luck or kind of like in 87, 88, when I got pulled into the business, I just happened to be around the right people at the right time. So, now I've got this group of people, from audio production people to finance people to wonderful script writers that I work with. And I have five scripts of my own now that we're submitting under my production company, that are, because I saw what I saw happening in the horror industry was not really making me feel good about it anymore. It's just, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of shock and horror, but no real story that gives you a connection to the character. And that bothered me. So I started working on that. And I think now I've got a giant batch of scripts, and I've got a few people that I'm connected with that we can make movies like that again, that not only give you the monsters and the blood and guts that people like, but still care about the characters a little bit. So I don't know about you guys, but for me, I watch stuff now and I just feel really disconnected from the characters. I don't feel it's bummer for them, they're dead.
Yeah, it do. And a lot of times it feels like things have just been created just kind of for the sake of,
right,
which it can be fine, but if everything starts to become that, it just kind of it gets old quick.
It gets boring. Yeah. So I decided to start changing that. And I've another person that I'm working very closely with is Mick Strawn from Nightmare on Elm Street 4. He's directing a new film called House in the Pines. I was the first person he called for effects. And then that sort of spawned all these other scripts that I'm working on now that they seem to be stacking up and have some neat things in the works. Definitely some neat things in the works.
That's I always love hearing that, and I feel like just when you had mentioned, you weren't sure if it was luck or whatever, and I can't remember who the quote is from, but that always reminds me of the harder you work, the luckier you seem to get, and it's surprising, I guess, how many creative people have actually managed to turn this whole pandemic situation into a good thing in a lot of ways. And it's really nice to see now that things are, hopefully we're on the road to a better time, that people have created new avenues, new doors have opened. Did you expect that, I guess, when this thing all started to kick off? How did you feel initially?
Well, initially when the pandemic hit, I was like, holy shit, everything's going to shut down. Like my industry really did. I mean, it did. Mm-hmm. It shut down. So for me, I thought about it, and I started, like I said, I started doing podcasts and then these other like streaming events and things like that. But then my brain started thinking, like, this is a change. This is a huge change. It's a paradigm shift. It means that the big studios aren't going to be able to do as much as they want to do because of this.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I sort of restructure myself? Because I'm never going to be that, well, I shouldn't say never, but I'm not going to be, I don't see myself as the guy that would be hired by Paramount or MGM or Universal to direct films. They're not that focused on horror, frankly. So I thought, well, if I'm so bored with the horror industry, then maybe it's time for me to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt, motivated myself to be a change in what I wanted to see and what I feel that my fans want to see, because I talk to fans all the time, even virtually. I was going to I did a lot of outdoor conventions and drive-in appearances and different things like that. And I talked to fans at length about that. And I just took all that in and I thought, I could change this if I did this right. So here I am.
And was that something, as regards to scripts and stuff, I know you probably can't say too much, but were those ideas that you had come up with or were in your mind, or were these things that other people created and you are going to put everything together?
Yes, there it's a little bit of both. Okay. There are creatives that sought me out, like through the pandemic. I've like one of my writers that I absolutely love working with, because his stuff is just his stories have such teeth, is Eric Christopher Myers. Now he was a writer for Ain't It Cool News, and we did like some virtual interview thing or some PSA that I did, right? So afterwards we just kind of kept in touch, and he was asking me to look at scripts, and that's kind of where it started. It started with that. And the same thing with my other writer is I've been getting scripts for a few years, because I would produce music videos and different things throughout the years in between, like doing effects or props or whatever it was I was making. So people would send me scripts, and 9 times out of 10, I'd get 4 pages in, and I'd be absolutely bored to tears and either throw it away or, file it. But Todd, who's my other writer, I got a script from him. I would say probably 4 years ago, I got a script from him, and I like started reading it, and I literally couldn't put it down. So I read this script from the first page to the end in one sitting, and I never do that.
Wow.
So why was that? That was telling me something.
Mm-hmm.
So I met with him. I sat down with him. I said, I have to do this film. I have to make this film. So we sat down. We created an agreement that I was going to shop funding, which I have for years, and now I actually have a funding source. But it's creating those alliances with like-minded people that are bored with the stories the way they are. And that's sort of what I've done. I've somehow these people have gravitated to me, and I want to make good films. I want to make good horror films, and I wanted to change that. So that's been my goal all through this pandemic, because I feel like this is a window that changing that paradigm, because of the big industry kind of tanking for a little while and not being able to produce things, that it allowed us a window for independents to come in and start making stuff and getting noticed and making a difference. So,
and
just lit a fire under me.
Obviously, you know, I guess you can't reveal too much, but what kind of things can we expect?
Well, I actually a week ago signed on with, I don't know if you know who Jack Shoulder is,
mm-hmm.
and his producer Josh. We are, I don't know if I want to call it a vampire film, but it is very vampiric. That starts shooting in September. I don't know how much I can say about it. I know that it's not necessarily something new, but it is a reinvention of how vampires are viewed. And I feel pretty good about it. I really like the direction they've gone with it. And I think that this story also has characters that you care about.
Yeah.
So, I think it's going to be good. And Jack, I've known Jack for a couple of years now, because we're represented by the same appearance manager, and that's kind of how this blossomed. You know, it turned into that. He contacted me because we're handled by the same guy. So, and now, of course, Mick is involved in that as well. So I feel really good about the team. You know, I know that we're going to make something good here, mm-hmm. and come out of the other end with a nice product. That being said, I know that House in the Pines is the same way. We're just a bunch of like-minded people really want to make something that counts, mm-hmm. and has that kind of feeling that you got with 80s horror. You know, you get there's a different feeling. I get that from fans all the time. They're like, 80s horror just had that something different. Mm-hmm. And we kind of know what that is, being as old as we are, because we were the guys that made it, and we know what the differences are in a lot of filmmakers now versus what we did. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of processes that are missed, that we're adding back to that. So we hope that everybody enjoys what we're doing, because that's the goal.
How big of a help is something like networking, or I guess the relationships you form? Is that a huge part of being able to create, you know, something that will last, or something that really is done from passion?
For me, it definitely is. I have to surround myself with those like-minded people, and with that, at least a similar vision. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like if they have a completely different, not necessarily perspective, but a different way of doing things, or a different way of doing business, or there's a lot of things that come into play when you're making a film, but you have to have like-minded people that want to make that difference and have that similar vision that you do. It's really important for me. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I've been really lucky. I've gotten these people that have sort of gravitated to me, so I feel good about it, you know?
And I guess switching from, I know you said you're still going to be obviously involved in the effects side of things, but moving into, I guess, that producer slash director role, do you have those same feelings that you had maybe before when you threw yourself into the effects world?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Nervous, excited, but really nervous. And, it's funny because I saw Danny Elfman did this master class recently. And I mean, this is Danny Elfman we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. But I saw a side of him that I've never seen. And he sort of threw that vulnerability out there that, when he was given his first score to do for a film, he didn't know what the hell he was doing. Yeah. He had no idea. And he just focused, did what he did what he knew how to do. And there it was. So it's kind of similar for me. I'd say, yeah, I'm nervous as hell. And I know the production process. Mm-hmm. I have 35 years of learning it, but still, yeah, I'm nervous as hell. I mean, I want to do this. It's a focus and it's a fire. And I'm really motivated, and I'm motivated mostly by the fact that I've had so much interaction with fans recently, and I had no idea I had the fan base I have. I had no clue. I had absolutely no clue that even existed.
Yep.
So, for me, it's important because I know it's important for them. And I saw nobody doing anything about it. So I thought, well, maybe I should be the guy to do it. And slowly but surely over the last year, these people have gravitated to me and these projects kind of came by my way. I'll tell you about another one. One that I'm submitting under my production company that I'll be directing. I can't say what it is. Mm-hmm. I can just tell you that Lynn Lowry is involved in it. It is something she worked very hard at getting rewrites done of something she wanted to redo. And she and I were on the road together for a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And we just talked about it and she liked what I had to say and was interested in what I wanted to do. And I told her I wanted to work with her. So now that's in my project stack. And I asked her if she would mind if I directed it. And she is absolutely delighted for me to direct it.
That's great to hear. I love, there's been so many conversations I've had recently about people who, I don't like using the word reinvented because, like yourself, you've never really went away, but I love the fact that, you had said you never really realized how much of a fan base were there. It's nice to hear that now and hear I guess the creative people feel motivated and reinvigorated and actually have a really good shot at, like you said, doing something about it.
Yeah.
It's not taking over. It doesn't, it starts to feel like maybe a little bit of those monopolies are kind of slowly drifting away.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
That's really, it's not that I want them to go away totally, but I mean, those large entities are more focused on the bottom line. They're not focused on, I mean, I'll tell you, and I'm sure some listeners might hate me for saying this, but Godzilla versus Kong was a prime example of that all they gave a shit about was getting people in the door and getting money. I felt like that was the biggest letdown of 2020.
And it happens a lot.
Yeah. And it happens a whole lot. But I mean, for someone like me, who I've been a Godzilla fanatic my whole life, mm-hmm. and having gone and seen that, it's funny, I went and saw it with Mick Strawn, and he and I went into a theater. We were doing, I think we were doing Full Moon Tattoo Show when we did that. Mm-hmm. But we snuck out to see it because we were really excited about it. And we came out of the theater looking at each other, just scratching our heads going, what in the hell was that? So, it's funny because, it kind of, that also invigorates guys like us to use whatever we have now as a pedigree, so to speak, to step in and do something about what's being done. Like, I'm sorry, but you know, it's not that I don't want to make money too, but it just killed me to think that you're not giving the fans what they want. How hard is that?
Do you think that comes from maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, or is it like a case of the more people that become involved, the more convoluted the entire thing becomes?
You know, I this is kind of going to take me back to my punk rock days, but corporate conspiracy. You know, I hate to say it, but you know, with these larger companies that knock out these films, sure, they want to make money, and some of the stuff they put out is okay. And they do wind up making lots of money, but I hate to say it, it just feels like so much of their stuff is so focused on marketing rather than the actual meat of the film. And that really pains me. It sucks to think that they're spending millions and millions on marketing it just to get people in the door. And as soon as they do, you just know they didn't give a shit about the movie.
Yeah.
It's all about making money. And that's the unfortunate thing that's happened. Like, I remember a struggle that even at Universal years ago, when there was a company named Seagram that was an alcohol company that bought Universal, and they changed everything. I remember everything happening internally. They made all these changes, and it was literally not about filmmaking. It was all about dollars. And that wound up changing, of course, because NBC bought it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it depends on who you have that owns your company and is running it and what their vision is. But sometimes, yeah, I feel like a lot of those larger entities, yeah, they're too big for their britches. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many people involved, too many opinions. And at the end of the day, it's about money for them. So they wind up really not caring.
Yeah. And it's funny because if you look at it from an audience or a fan perspective, especially with horror, you know, recently we've seen something like Psycho Gorman, for example, and just how well received it was. Because, I mean, I guess it's original, and like you said, it's tough to come up with something original. But I feel like even though it was new, it just had that fan service.
Right.
And it just, I don't know how to explain it, but it had this feel like, a lot of times I feel like you can, at least me and I would guess other horror fanatics, you can feel the difference between something done for passion and creativity and something done for the bottom line. There's a huge difference there.
Yep.
And it's nice to see things like Shudder and places like that, I mean, get these out to audiences. But I really hope this post-COVID thing, like a lot of the projects you're talking about, and I know there's many others in your position, I actually can't wait to see the end result. Just hearing you talk about the last 12 months and what you've been able to achieve, you know, from this time last year to now, I can't wait to see what happens in 2 years and in 5 years and everything that's going to come out of that.
That's the thing. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize that, it does take time to develop all these films. And it's like right now I'm not only doing like House in the Pines and this film with Jack, but, and those are still taking time to get the packages together and get the funding together. Mm-hmm. They all take time. And the package I'm sitting on with the other 5 films I'm submitting those as one under my production company. But, those are gonna take a little time to make them all. And I hope that the fans like kind of stick it out. I just want to get one out there so people understand.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do. But, I think there's others out there that are like-minded. I've recently, sort of formed an alliance with a director named Eric Mathis, making a movie called The Macabre. That one's almost done, but he's been crowdfunding the whole thing. And he and I are working together now on some things going forward, which I'm actually trying to get involved with him, helping him finish Macaw as well. But he is a very like-minded guy too. He's a like-minded filmmaker. He likes making monster movies. He likes changing things up a little bit and giving you content that you're excited about, you know. So I feel good about working with him too.
Is there a project out there that you have in mind, obviously without saying what it is, that you're going to use to try and spearhead this whole thing?
Well, the directorial debut for me, that's one of them. Mm-hmm. But that one, I like the way that the story's going right now. We're almost done with the script, and man, I'll tell you, this one's going to be. It's even going to be hard for me to direct because the story itself has some really disturbing stuff that happens, like really disturbing. So, but with that film, I want people to leave the theater and go, "Oh my God." You know, I want them to leave thinking about it for days, you know. So that one's going to have some real teeth in it, you know, and make you leave really thinking about, you know, your choices.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the goal with that, though, is like every action has a consequence, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the goal of the story. And I feel like it's culturally relevant right now. So I feel good about the story, but it's really disturbing stuff we're putting in it. So I think I'm going to catch flack for that, but I just think it needs to be done.
Yeah.
It's sort of that, I don't know if you're familiar with the band Skinny Puppy, but it was something like they did in the early days. They did a really theatrical thing where they were a big animal activists, and they would actually stage the killing of a dog on stage. It was like putting that sort of in your face to show the horrors of what people are doing, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're doing with this. So that one's an interesting one. And then there's another one that Eric has done called Smilers that's another one that I'm really, I read the initial script and now we've revised it and it's even better. That I'm so excited about this that I had to do this. And he pretty much wanted me involved. However, he didn't care, which I appreciated. But the moment I read it, I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this film. So that movie is just crazy. It's going to be fun and scary as hell. And yeah.
Do you enjoy I guess the writing part of, you know, script revisions and stuff? Do you enjoy coming up with ideas? And
I do. You know, I'm not really a writer, but I do like getting these stories from guys like him and going through it and saying, well, you know, rather, like, for instance, like one of the things Mick and I did with the House in the Pines script was we went through it, and there was so much, you know, you go through a script and you find so many areas of like dialogue explaining something. Like they go through these scenes full of dialogue to explain one simple thing that you can do with just a shot. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference between like a seasoned filmmaker and somebody that hasn't really made that many films.
Yeah.
So you can take and you can establish something in just a quick shot, and you can lose 5 pages of dialogue that is just boring as hell. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing that like I enjoy going through and looking and saying, okay, well, the story's here, but we don't need to do this. We don't need to explain this. You know, it's just better because finding a good story with a good core and a good plot, that inspires me to go through and say, well, how can we make this better? Mm-hmm. So while I'm not, like I said, I'm not the writer, I can give at least a little perspective on how to improve it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as regards the directing side of things, is there anything you've been doing to prepare, or do you prefer, obviously you've got a lot of experience and you've seen kind of how everything is done.
Yeah.
Is there anything you do now in preparation for when that happens, or is it just a case of, you've just got to go out there and do it?
I think a little bit of both. In a lot of ways, it's you got to get out there and you got to see what's in front of you, because as a director, you may have something in your head that translates completely differently once it's being done.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that might change, right there on set. But that being said, yes, there's lots of things I do to prepare. I personally will go through my list of, let's call them, I don't know that they're similar films. I think it would be more find as similar as you can get with a director that you really like what they did, or performances that you like. That's the kind of stuff I like to prepare myself with, is how do I want to see, like let's say I'll put a film in my list that has a look that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's use Nightmare on Elm Street 4. It has a look, and that's all production design. I mean, that's all mixed drawn work. So you go through and it has a look and feel. It's consistent through the whole film, from the lighting to the way the sets are, to the way the fog happens. All of these things are that look. So I go through and make a list of, this is how I want it to look. This is the kind of look I want to see. And then I look at performances. I kind of make a wish book of from everything, of the look to the performances to what the creature is going to look like to what, so it just creates a sort of study list of things that I have to pull from. And then I go back and I watch those things to make sure that, okay, that's what I have in my head. So is that really the look that I want?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it takes a while to figure out what your vision is. I mean, I usually am pretty good with seeing, foresight and knowing what I want, and going through all of those. Usually that's exactly right. My list is good, but still you can get out there and do it, and it doesn't quite line up with what you want. So, I mean, you really, it's all of that. You have to do a lot. It's a lot of prep. It's a lot of seat of the pants.
Yeah, that makes sense. You had mentioned, obviously you try to curate a list, I guess, of different things you might like to implement. What are some movies that you enjoy? They can be new, old. Do you have any comfort horror movies that you go back to over and over again?
Comfort horror movies. That's interesting. That's it. What's funny about that to me is my, my wife is not a horror person at all.
Really?
So yeah, so it gets hard for me to watch stuff. I mean, she's pretty good about it if I really have to watch something, but she doesn't like being scared. She gets nightmares easy. So, that presents challenges in itself.
Mm-hmm. I feel
but yeah, I mean, it's just like I was just saying, it's not that I have a favorite per se, because I actually enjoy seeing things that, like independent film that was done for 50 grand, or I've seen projects that someone threw out there that they did for under 10 grand. And it blows me away at what some people can really pull out of the camera for the extremely limited budgets they have. And that, that should be fostered, and that's how you learn. And that's, you look at your project going forward or whatever, or you look at other movies that inspire you, and that's it. I don't particularly have a favorite, because I like things from 1902 on, that I use as reference. So, it's a little too hard to say, is there something that I go to? There's just so many different things from so many different genres that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Do you, just on the question of it, it just came into my mind, like you've mentioned, there's people who seem to be able to pull out crazy end products from relatively no money. Do you think, because I often wonder, I see a project like that and I go, wow, I wish I could see this guy with 10 million or whatever. Do you think that would hinder the process, or would it actually elevate it?
I don't know. That really falls on the individual, and it's hard to say, because I think in a lot of ways, if someone, let's say they do something for $10,000 budget, and then all of a sudden they're given 5 million, I don't think that the learning curve is there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it might be a little dangerous to do that so quickly, when there is still a learning curve of the entire process. And I still see films today that are put out without, I mean, honestly, a lot of people today that make micro budget films don't even know what production design is.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really understand what production design is or what it's about. So you have stuff that kind of comes in like with inconsistent shots or inconsistent lighting, and certain things about it that don't kind of line up. I think that there's a process, and I do think that those people that make those micro budget films can certainly, if someone jumped from, let's say, making a $10,000 film to an $80,000 film, that might help them versus hinder them. I think if they were given a lot of money, I mean, that's a big jump, but
Mm-hmm.
but by and large, you go from 10 to the 50 to 80,000, and then maybe into the 100,000s, and then up to the millions. You take that path, and I think you'd learn more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess going forward then for the future for you, it's going to be directing. Is that the main?
I'm not 100% focused on directing. There are just things I feel compelled to direct. There is another film that I do want to direct, that I have, that was early on. That's the script I referred to earlier on from one of my writers that I got a few years ago. I've been sitting on that script for a long time. I want to direct that film, and I want it to be exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I've sat on it for so long.
Yeah.
I know, and it's given me 4 years to really piece together the changes I want in the script. I want it written for a different environment. And I've had time to learn that about that story, that I think it makes more sense now to me, where I've sort of directed it to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really good about it, and I'm compelled to do that. So yeah, I mean, I'm not focused on directing 100%. I want to produce a lot of stuff. I think there's a lot of talent out there, and I'm helping foster that with these writers that I have, and the production team that I have is myself and Mick and a couple seasoned guys, and then there's also some guys with some amazing vision like Eric Mathis. I just got involved with him, and he's got really a good vision when he comes up with stuff that's got meat.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really good about working with him going forward. I want him involved, and there's it's just, to me, it's all about teamwork, and I feel like I've got the best team I've ever had, and so that motivates me more. It's all about the people you surround yourself with. If you do that correctly, you're motivated to do bigger and better things.
Mm-hmm. And I love as well, I know any community can be, I guess, for want of a better word, toxic, but I feel like that the horror community, when something, like I said before, is done for passion and for the love of it, they really do get behind those projects. Like I've seen some tiny projects from years and years ago, and they still get talked about, and a lot of times it seems like year on year they just get more and more popular.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, I think. So for somebody, a couple of people had asked, somebody trying to, I guess it's a lot more of a general question. Somebody following a dream, whether it be directing, writing, a lot of those things in a lot of places in the world are still seen as just a dream, I guess.
Right.
Do you have any advice for somebody to try and, I guess, stick the course when things don't seem to be going well, or? you know, everybody else is telling you, you know, you're an idiot, you shouldn't do this, just go and
That's
work
going
in
to
the
happen.
grocery store.
That's going to happen. That's going to happen. You're going to have people that think they're sensible telling you what you need to do and what you should be doing. But honestly, if you're passionate about it, I would say stay the course. Don't let it dissuade you. If it's something that you feel compelled to do, go forward and do it. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, this business is not easy. This business is one of the most difficult businesses to work in. I was very lucky. You know, I had parents that were in it, and it was still a hard road for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I just stayed the course. I wanted to make things. I wanted to make neat things. I wanted to make monsters, and that's, you know, that's obviously sort of shifted over the years, because now, like, I'm in a little bit of a shift myself, because effects, there's so many talented effects artists, young talented effects artists, that while I've had them tell me they look up to me, I look at them and I'm like, wow, you're so much better than I ever was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so much talent out there, and I don't. I guess I'm different in a lot of ways, because I don't think of myself as like I'm the be all end all of effects people. I'm certainly not. I'm just a guy that was very fortunate. I got put in some great situations. I got hired on some wonderful films, and I love doing it. And I love seeing these young people coming up that just, I mean, one of the sculptors I have that I bring in for stuff just blows me away with his stuff. And he's self-taught.
And just from hearing you say that there, do you still deal with, I guess a lot of people call it imposter syndrome, or a lot of people get into something and then you always second guess yourself, or you always kind of think, you know, should I be doing, maybe not now for you, but a lot of people when, you know, maybe they're starting out, or they've got their first couple of gigs, or maybe they've landed in a position that they wanted to, but never thought they would. And you kind of start to second guess everything. What would you say to someone dealing with that?
Well, I would say that is a very common thing among artists. Now, anybody is a filmmaker, and any part of filmmaking is an artist of sorts. Mm-hmm. Whether it be the lighting guy, the sound designer, the production designer, we're all artists. And I have struggled my entire life. And even though I've got 35 plus years behind me in doing this, there's still, you know, I still have those self-doubts. I still get into things and I'm like, am I going to be able to do this? But I have to climb over that, because I would rather be the person that regrets having tried. Mm-hmm. I'd rather know that I tried than live the rest of my life going, well, I could have done this, or I could have done that, or maybe I should have tried this or that. I don't want to be that guy. You know, I want to at least have tried and failed. Mm-hmm. And if I failed, how can I learn from it? Because honestly, in this whole industry, that's really what it's about. Even especially in effects, you know, you learn, like you test things, you make things, you test them, they fail miserably, and you know what not to do the next time. So it's definitely a series of that. And believe me, the self-doubt's always there, because you're making something that nobody knows how to do. It's like, I'll say that I did this show with Brian Yuzna recently, and Brian, I love Brian to death, because he is one that, as a director and a producer, truly understands what special effects means. And special effects to him means it's something that nobody can do in real life, or, you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, there's stuff that you could do in real life, but you're fooling the camera. Mm-hmm. So essentially you're doing something that's not feasible to do. So, it's bound to not work at some point, or it's bound to fail. But when we do that, that's how we learn to do it better, or we learn to do it the right way, or we figure out a way that makes it happen. That's what doing this stuff is about. And I think it's that way through the entire filmmaking process, from lighting things a certain way to to sound design to, it is a creative process and it takes work to do it. But if you keep at it, you'll get what you want.
So would you say, I guess then the difference between maybe somebody who can make something happen and get somewhere is probably not being put off by those feelings? Like a sense of 100% of people feel those things. The only thing that differentiates a lot of people is the people who are willing to step over that, I guess.
Yeah, I can't say that I can't speak for everybody. I can only speak for myself. But I know, like, even Steve, like when we did the Slipknot music video, this is Steve Johnson we're talking about.
Uh-huh.
Like, I remember we got on set and he started to get really nervous. Like we were ready to shoot. We had everything set up that day. He had come from Los Angeles and he had never gotten any like 100% feedback from Sean Crahan about what we were doing. So he was really nervous about what if he hates it? What if he shit cans the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
I said, look, we're here. We're on set. We're doing this. This is today. You got to get out of that headspace. I said, go have a cigarette and come back and we'll kick this thing's ass. And we did.
Mm-hmm.
16-hour day, but we kicked its ass and we shot some absolutely beautiful stuff. So, yeah, I think we all have it. I mean, Steve's been doing it a hell of a lot longer than I have. And to see him still struggle with that sometimes is it brings that back into focus, like, okay, so I'm not the only one that does this. So anybody that feels that kind of way, I mean, I can't say don't, because you'll feel that way, but know that you're not alone. You're not alone. Even veterans still feel that way.
I think that's key for people to realize. I think so many people get turned off of everything, and
Sure.
Like you said, that really hits home for me personally. But just hearing the, I would rather be somebody who regrets trying something than living that life where you constantly wonder what if.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can sit around and wonder what if the rest of your life, but I'd rather be the guy that tried and failed than the guy that never tried.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so final few questions. What does a day in your life right now look like? Obviously, without getting too personal from the work side of things, what's a standard day look like for you right now?
Most people would probably be frightened of what my day looks like these days. I don't know if you realize this, but during COVID, I also opened a museum.
Mm-hmm.
So out here in Las Vegas, this was actually my wife's idea. She just saw some of the things that I was like, I do a lot of restoration work, and you probably see some pieces behind me here that are going into my museum. And I've done stuff for private collectors for about 6.5 years now. And my wife just finally said, you got all these cool pieces coming in. We need to figure out a way to share these with the public. And one of my clients / friends has been collecting for as long as I've been doing special effects. And we partnered with him. So there's that. And I'm trying to balance running the museum with appearances and events and things like that the museum's doing, along with my producer role, along with my production meetings for this or that, and design meetings for this or that. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of emails, a lot of networking, a lot of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's an overwhelming type of day, but I feel good about what's coming. And there are days that I look and I just don't even want to think about it. There's days I just want to curl up on the couch and don't deal with any of it. But if I don't, those opportunities go away.
Yeah. Do you feel like you work better in that circumstance where I guess you're spinning multiple plates at the one time?
It's funny that you asked that, because I've been told that I do. I've been told that I excel under pressure. And I feel like that's probably why I am where I am. I don't like the pressure, but I seem to do well with it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's a hard pill to swallow, but but it's, you know, I have to look at it more like, okay, these are opportunities I'm not going to let go of. And yes, I got to deal with it. What do I have to deal with today? What has to be done today? And I have to prioritize it. And it's getting harder and harder to keep my calendar and my schedule and everything balanced, but it is about balance.
So this is a question I ask everybody. Sometimes it catches them a little bit off guard. It's why horror and what does it mean to you?
Well, that is a good question. Horror, because I've just loved it my whole life. You know, like I said, I was the kid of an executive at Universal Studios. I spent a lot of my childhood there at Universal Studios. I was given a lot of free reign, meaning that like my mom would have to work, so she would give me the keys to her golf cart, and I could pretty much go wherever I want with this nice little badge I had. And that little badge got me on the rides in front of everybody else, and I got to go do whatever I wanted to do at Universal. So that again is like pouring fuel on a fire. Like I had a fire for monsters, and I wanted to be around Frankenstein. I wanted to see more of how the Wolfman was made. So that's what I did. I'd wind up at work with my mom. I'd be bored. She'd give me the key to the golf cart. I would go and do everything I could possibly do and get into everything I could get kicked off of on Universal's lot. And that would be even like driving the golf cart onto somebody's set and getting kicked off. So, you know, it was just a drive that I had. You know, I really, really gravitated to the monsters as a child, and it just grew. I got this passion for it, and then making them was a whole other thing. I mean, it kind of ruins things for you because you can become a critic, but because everything you see with horror, you're like, oh, that could have been done so much better. Yeah. But you know, I still love doing it. You know, I really do. I love doing it. I love monsters. I want to make monsters. I want to, you know, I love it.
Do you find yourself now, do you find it increasingly harder now to sit down and watch a movie and not either come up with ideas, or like you said just there, maybe a better way of doing something, or, oh, I could implement, or that gave me an idea for another movie or another script?
Yeah. I get that a lot. I mean, you sit down and with everything and with the intent to enjoy it. And I do. There's a lot of movies that I do enjoy. But there's also like those movies that you sit down to watch and you just can't get the filmmaker out of yourself. You know, I can't separate myself from it because I'll look at a way that something's done, or the way that something's structured, or the way that the script is done, the lack of acting, this and that. But those are all things that I use as tools. Those are all things that I use like, okay, well, I would never want to do it that way. I would want to do it my way. And my way is what? So, you know, if that's taking notes or whatever while I'm doing it, I just use it all as a tool. I love films. I've loved them for years, and I love different genres for different reasons, but I watch them, I study them, I use them as tools to get visions for what I want to do. It's all relative.
Do you find it hard? Do you find it hard to switch off, I guess? Or do you ever want to?
It is hard to switch off. But there are times, you know, and this is where I come away from a film feeling really good, is if I get pulled into a film where I don't feel that anymore, and I'm caring about characters, or I find myself involved in the story. That makes me feel really good, because when the movie's over, I'll think about that for a second. And I'll be like, hey, you know what? I didn't once tear this thing apart. I got involved in it. Yeah. What did they do that made me do that? So, you know, there's films that do that for me too. So that's why I love watching movies.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. And I hope that maybe in a couple of months, when you've got some more stuff you can talk about, when some of these projects start to come together, we can have another chat.
Definitely.
Where can people find you or support you online, what's the best way for somebody to, I guess, support the cause?
Well, our museum is on Facebook and Instagram. It's called Cinelogia, Cineloggia. And that's how to find our museum, or cinelogia.com. Myself, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is Nick Benson 427. And on Facebook, it's Nick J. Benson Official.
Okay. For everybody listening to this episode, the links to all of Nick's stuff will be down below anyway. And you can find that on any podcast platform. Like I said, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, and hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.